Thanks for being with us on Sky News. This rolling coverage of the departure, the resignation of Daniel Andrews. He's been Premier for the best part of 9 years, more than 3,000 days, and we have got every angle covered this afternoon. We've got Labor pollster Kos Samaras from Redbridge with us, Michael Kroger, the former Victorian Liberal Party President, Andrew Clennell, my colleague and political editor, and Simon Love, our Victorian political reporter. All of us and many more to join you this afternoon, including Steve Bracks, will be my guest a little bit later. Let's go and bring in Simon now, who's got to speak to a number of politicians and members of Daniel Andrews' party, and no doubt as well, someone who's got a fair bit at stake in all of this, John Pesutto, who no doubt you'll be speaking to as well, Simon.
I will be. He's holding a news conference in about an hour's time. We'll bring that to our viewers here on Sky News. The first comments from John Pesutto following this decision. Also expected this afternoon, Daniel Andrews, he said later this afternoon he'll be heading up to Government House. My guess is he's headed from here at Parliament over to Treasury Place to speak privately with staff. He'll then get in his car and drive the short distance from Treasury Place in East Melbourne over to Government House on Government House Drive, just south of the CBD, to go and see the Governor, Professor Margaret Gardner, to ultimately resign his commission as Premier of Victoria, although that resignation will be effective from 5 p.m. tomorrow. Daniel Andrews tomorrow will attend a full caucus meeting of the Labor caucus, expected to be held here at Parliament House at midday, and it is expected that there'll be at least a couple of contenders for the premiership. We know that Jacinta Allen, the Deputy Premier, who was installed as Deputy after a number of ministers departed not long ago, she will no doubt put her hand up. We expect also Ben Carroll, a figure from the right faction within Labor, may also put his hand up to MPs. And other contenders could include, outside Chancellor, Treasurer Tim Pallas, the Government Services Minister, member for Essendon, Danny Pearson, as well as gained some prominence in the Parliament as well. So we expect there may be a contest, although Daniel Andrews not endorsing anyone, not getting behind anyone, not foreshadowing anything. Also, when he was asked before here on the roof of the Annex building here at Parliament whether he'd endorse a female to replace him as Premier, he would not be drawn on that, essentially saying it's up to the Labor caucus. I'll go off and try and speak with a few Labor MPs or ministers shortly, Kieran, but I just want to leave you with this.
Good.
The fact that this was a big surprise at 1:30, we saw, even before all the ministers arrived here, one Labor MP from in Melbourne's eastern suburbs was on the roof of Parliament. I asked him, have you heard anything? Do you know what's happening? He had no idea. So it just goes to show how tightly kept this announcement was by the Premier, Daniel Andrews. He says he arrived at it in the last couple of days, and in the coming hours, he'll head up to Government House to formally resign.
He was always someone who knew how to handle the communications, that's for sure, even though he didn't always answer the questions as many would have hoped he would. Simon, thank you. We've got Kos Samaras, Michael Kroger and Andrew Clennell. Andrew, first to you. This comes within a week, just days since the announcement of that COVID inquiry, an issue, the pandemic, which regardless of whatever else people talk about in terms of the Andrews legacy, that issue, that period will hang over the Daniel Andrews time of his premiership, no doubt, into the future.
Oh, it defines him the most. But having said that, that's the case for Premiers Berejiklian and McGowan as well. It's just the biggest thing that's come along in the last few decades, in fact, in politics, and particularly in state politics. But I do think it is intriguing, Kieran, that just 1 week after the Prime Minister announces that the Royal Commission, the Commission of Inquiry, won't be looking specifically at the actions of state governments, Dan Andrews taps the mat. I also think that there's no doubt that he'll get a lot of criticism for leaving 10 months into a term. Unless there's some extenuating circumstances, this is absolutely unheard of, Kieran. I mean, I've seen a lot of these premiers retire, and particularly in the context of a 4-year term, they at least go 18 months in, or often they go with 18 months to go until the next election, just to give the new leader time to establish themselves, to get up some policies and to run successfully at the election. So I find that quite extraordinary that it's just 10 months in. He didn't hang on for another 8 months or so at the very least. The other thing Dan Andrews might find, Bob Carr certainly found it, other premiers who've gone on their own volition found it, is the new regime has to distance themselves from you. They therefore find themselves, in order to refresh, particularly politically, they have to criticise your past decisions, your legacy. Let's see if that happens, whether it's Jacinta Allen or whoever it is who takes over, whether the new Premier has to go down that route, because they have to redefine themselves with that electorate. But the happiest person today, I think, will be John Pesutto. Daniel Andrews, no matter what you thought of him, was a seriously formidable politician. And when this kind of retirement happens, we've seen it happen with Roger Cook replacing McGowan. We saw it happening with Morris Yema replacing Bob Carr. It levels the field in terms of that government opposition contest, Kieran.